Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm just between you and lunch. So I guess I'm going to do my best. There's not going to be a lot of physics in my presentation, might make it lighter. So thank you very much to the Academy first for the invitation to provide a slightly different perspective here on investment in quantum technologies. Not just physics, as I said, but I try to bring a perspective a little bit to trigger discussions and debate that the topics that were figured in the memo that the Academy shared as well. I think there's a couple of things I want to share a little bit beyond investments as well. So first, yeah, Jean talked about history a little bit earlier. I'm not going to go 100 years ago, but it was just 30 years ago. I'm somewhere here on the right. So just to justify that I have some credentials actually in physics. Was with Alain, was doing my PhD 1996. Was a great time, the beginning of a couple of good things in neutral atoms physics. But I want to show that because I think it's really important in the field of investment to understand a little bit what we're talking about in quantum technologies, and that's a point I'll make a little bit earlier. Actually, I had started in ions with Professor Walter at the Max Planck, but I've not gone very far in ions. I switched to neutral atoms, sorry, Chris, but that's life. And what happened actually is that I switched to a very different field, not related to physics, because at the time it was really hard to get a job into quantum physics when you were at a PhD, master's degree or something. Very different now. I'll make a point about that a little bit later as well. But back in 14 or 15, I was living in the US in Palo Alto. I heard about IonQ, Rigetti. Started to play with the IBM machine. I think first qubits were 2016. If I remember correctly, there was nobody in the queue at the time. It was fairly easy to get the job done. And I decided to come back to the field. In two roles, I co-founded Pascal with a couple of people you know, Antoine Broes, Thierry Lahaye, Georges-Olivier Raymond. Alain's involved as well. And we did, above all, the thing that I'm really focusing on 100%, which is a fund dedicated to quantum technologies. And I'm showing this picture because we've all gotten a little bit older, obviously, including Alain, has a nice shirt, as you can see. But that's the team that's making the investments. And half of the team is made of physicists. So Will Zhang, who has been working with Steve at Yale, I think he did his undergrad there. Pauline has been studying at Laboratoire Castel Bruxelles in France as well. I think so 3 out of 6 were physicists, actually, or physics background. And to me, that's really, really important. So next, what do we do? So Quantum Nation is a fund, so we're investing. We're investing in startups. I'll explain a little bit some things about that, how it works. But that's the vision we have. We think, quantum physics can change the world for some aspects, and it's not something that people have understood very well yet. So we're focusing on companies that are built from quantum physics. I put the italics because it's not only quantum physics. Usually it's a mix, it's hybrid. Classical quantum is super rare, but we have solutions that are pure quantum based. And let's not forget about that. I'll come back to that later as well. The key point is really to focus on the applications. I mean, we want to invest in companies that make a difference, that have an impact for the sectors that I'm mentioning here: healthcare, energy, security, climate, computing. These are mostly the applications we're focusing on. And we invest in 3 segments: quantum computing, quantum sensing, and quantum communications. Now, a little bit of a primer for those here, and probably most of you who are not really familiar with how venture capital works. So we take equity from the companies we invest in, shares in the companies. But what's important is that there are different kinds of investors. So there are so-called early stage investors who invest in companies, well, essentially then when they go out of the lab. In our case, all but one of our 26 companies are spin-outs from labs, academic labs. That's a so-called deep tech characteristic. And we're focusing in the early days, really before things are too mature, before the company has validated everything and goes really into large-scale communication. We do these rounds that are called in VC terminology pre-seed, seed, Series A, typically. And quite frankly, in quantum and deep tech, contrary to what's written on this slide, where it gives the impression that Series A, you're already predictable, scalable, sustainable. I would argue with that. Usually in quantum technologies, it takes more time. It takes until, let's say, Series C, until companies have really gone through the main phases of validated the technology. So different kinds of investors. It's important because people are not looking at companies the same way. You're an early stage investor. you're really focusing on the science, on the team. If you're late-stage investors, you're going to look at sales, what the company has built and how it's working. There are not that many investors, but this has been growing since 2018, since we made our first investments. We're by far the largest investor. Not very visible on the right, but we're really focused on quantum. So with 26 investments, I mean, we're way past what others are doing. Usually generalist investors, they do at most 3-4 investments in the field. In our case, we are investing exclusively in that segment. But there's a lot of people now that are interested in investments in quantum technology. When I'm meeting with founders, where academics in particular, they're asking me all the time, okay, what I'm looking at, and surprisingly to them, I guess I always say I'm looking at the science first. That's the key point for us. It has to be outstanding science, competitive science in the best ecosystems in the world, because that's the way to build good companies that then will thrive and be successful. Of course, you want to develop some products, commercialization, etc. But in my opinion, it's not something necessarily we focus on in the very early days, but comes slightly later when the company is maturing. And time matters. I mean, I'm showing here that, as I wrote it here, we have to assess the technology's application in a relatively long time. We're talking 5 to 10 years maturation for this kind of company. So people need imagination, the investors and the startups and the founders as well. And that's something, in my opinion, that's lacking often, not to be, let's say, provocative, but with physicists in particular, I would say. Have a little bit more imagination about what your technology is good for and what you can develop. I think that's an important point to me. So Maciek talked about hype, and that's something, so that's really a bit weird how it went out, sorry for that on the PowerPoint, but that's something I wanted to show, you know, about the Gartner curve, I mean, hype curve. It's not nothing spectacular, but just to remind everybody that there's no innovation cycle without hype, fundamentally. I mean, we have to deal with that. It's there. It's a fact of life, and we have to deal with it. I saw a paper by one of your colleagues, José Ignacio Pérez Latorre, I think a few weeks ago. He published a paper on hype in quantum physics. On the science side, actually, he was talking about how scientists themselves are hyping things sometimes, or not their fault, sometimes university. So it's not only investors, startups, corporates, I mean, it's collective. That's something that we need to deal with. I think the way to go with that, and I'll come back also to that later, is really to work together to create a narrative around the application of these technologies. Talk about roadmaps, horizons, what needs to be done in order to reach maturity and substantial applications. Because to go from nothing to 50 billion markets, which is huge, obviously, in these consultants' reports, like in 20, 30 years, of course, things need to happen. I mean, we're not, not stupid here. I mean, we know things will happen. We know sometimes claims are exaggerate, but we need to understand what's exaggerate and what's realistic and work together on that. I like the word decode. I think it's really for us investors and a large part of the community to decode the claims actually that people are making about the science. What is it good for? What does it mean exactly? What impact can that have? And that's not obvious because science is hard and we need more physicists also, and that's my point in investment team. So Carl gave you a couple of numbers about investment. So I've got slightly different ones, but more or less matching. So I don't necessarily want to go too much into that. You can find that in reports. Just couple of things to say. First, the one top right shows investment in quantum technologies by venture capital per year. So essentially 21, 22, 2 billion per year, which is ridiculously low, actually, if you compare to other technologies. AI is 50 billion per year, venture capital. So with quantum, we're at least an order of magnitude away from the numbers other technology revolutions are benefiting from. So when I hear that it's overeating, there's too much money, that's quite the contrary, actually. I mean, and there's not that much money that gets into quantum. It should be the reverse. If we believe in what we're doing, if we believe in the perspectives of this science and the applications, even on the long term, we need different kinds of numbers, not 2 billion per year. So this year, obviously, has been a little bit tougher. Probably end up 1.5 billion venture capital this year. Not a drama, I would say. It's comparable to other deep tech sectors. Even AI has gone down 40% more or less this year. But the beginning of the year was tough, so I made a couple of comments here for some of our portfolio companies who were trying to raise. But now the situation since the summer, quite frankly, has been much better. We see new good rounds. valuations on the rise again. So all in all, I think things are quite decent. Some sectors benefiting more, as Carl said, quantum computing, that's a challenge. How to put more money into quantum sensing, not a topic for today, but that's a good one we should work on, how to put more balance into the investment. And the one on the right, bottom right, is about government support, slightly different numbers, well, hundreds of billions, it seems, pledged there. So that's essentially research, public money, infrastructures. Just to say that there's a lot of appetite and interest from governments to fund quantum technologies. And again, it may be our responsibility to funnel that, put it in the right direction, orient it in the right way, so that fundamental research is preserved, simplified, obviously, because no good startup can come out without a good fundamental research, and also, again, to work on applications. Again, the point, and there's many Europeans in the room, a point about Carl's comments yesterday. He said the US are leading in investment. That's true when you look at investment rounds from startups here. But I think that's true also largely because they were earlier. Companies started in 14, 15, quite a lot of them, raised money. European companies, whether IQM, OQC in the UK, Pascal, they came later, 2018, 2019, but they have reached now also substantial investment round, more than 100 million for a couple already. So definitely things are changing, going up here as well, and Europe is catching up on investment. But the fund itself, so that's what we've invested in. I said compute, sensing, I don't call it communications, more networks, because networking computers, but that entails these categories. Yeah, won't go too much into the details. Deep physics is essentially something sometimes I call quantum 1.5, a little bit less quantum, but like there's a company, Sensorium, generate surface for non-polariton in metamaterials for gas sensing, quite close, I mean, in terms of dynamic, to other quantum companies. So we've been largely focusing on Europe with this first fund, Quantum Nation 1. More than half of the companies are European. We have invested in neutral atoms, Pascal, in photonics, a couple silicon spin qubits, superconducting, now Quantic in Quebec, in Canada, and software and applications as well. And essentially, this fund is over, actually. So we've invested a large part of the money. We raised close to 100 million, 75 million invested. And yeah, it's a few words, but we're essentially going through a new fund right now to go on with investments in these companies. Something I put together for this presentation, and actually that's, I think, we try to be transparent, and I think hope it's going to be appreciated. So we put statistics from the portfolio, pulled on a statistic on investment, jobs, and publications and patents. So you'll see a couple of, I think, interesting numbers. So the first is about investment. Essentially, what it shows is that our investment, so essentially at this date, it was 69 million euro, has triggered, well, 279 million of investment by us and co-investors, other people who are investing in the companies. We're not alone, so that's pretty big. And also public investment, up to 63 million here. What's interesting is that at the beginning, usually public grants are larger than equity, than private funding. And then it's reversed, obviously. Private investment catches up. But what's nice is that there's a pretty big leverage. I mean, with a structure like us, we're able to lead to sizable impact. Something I've learned from Peter Chapman a couple of weeks ago, actually, from IonQ, which I put here because I think it's a nice one, but the importance of public procurement. So it was not in the slides before, but that's a fact he mentioned. And I think that's interesting when you look at the history of integrated circuits. At some point in time, the US government was buying all integrated circuits in the US in the 60s for the Apollo program. And that's what got them to scale, essentially. Lower price, develop the technology. And yeah, we should do that in quantum. That's fundamental. It has started. Europe has been in the lead on that, from that perspective. They procured quantum computers already with Pascal here for Jülich and in Germany and Gency in France, so supercomputing centers, procured 2 processors, 100 qubits, and they just are buying 6 more, actually, for supercomputing centers in Europe. That's public procurement. That's super important from many perspectives for these companies. But job creation, you remember I said it was hard in 1996 to find a job in quantum. Well, not the case anymore. I hope when you have a master's degree in quantum or a PhD, you can find a job in quantum startups. It's pretty nice. So we generated through the portfolio about 700 jobs. Proportion of women is really low, 25%. Women in STEM is a topic that we all know about, of course, but that's what it is. I mean, without hiding things, that's where we are at this point. I'd like to show this picture of Pascal there. So there are more than 200 people now working on several things, building, commercialization, etc. So large teams, but overall, a good dimension. And I think people tell me all the time, yeah, it's difficult to find talents. Quite frankly, I think not exactly. I think the system is generating a lot of good talents in quantum. I think we need to provide jobs and offer opportunities, and this is working fairly well. And the last one, which I like very much, but I might be a weird VC on this one, so I'm pushing my companies to publish a lot, actually. So that's the number of publications over the year, so more than 200 papers submitted for publication, some in good reviews. There was a nice paper by QFox in Nature Nano on transduction. White papers, the one on the bottom right, it's rare earth ions for quantum internet. I really like white papers, so it's a good way to put things in perspective and roadmaps, and that's an important one. But so for me, it's important because a startup has to give back to the community as well. I mean, has to engage in conversation, challenges, discussions, peer reviews. I think that's a way also to verify that things are in order, to be honest. So we have patents, we have publications. It's not antinomial, and that's something we're really pushing for. And to finish, I'd like to focus on 2 points, 2 challenges that I see, points for reflection. Happy to discuss more about that. First one is about startup creation. I think is the real question is the lab to startup model broken? That's the number of startups in that space created per year. So you see there's a problem. Definitely, there was a peak in 2018-19, startup creation, but things have gone not that well over the last 2 years. So the big question about how the tech transfer office are working, etc. Definitely. Ecosystems are complex, so that's a typical consulting slide, I guess. You see all the interactions between the parties, who is involved in company creation. There are investors, governments, corporations of all kinds, facilitators, universities, etc. So for a founder, it's complicated, and there needs to be, obviously, ways to make things easier for them. So one first thing is to work with entrepreneurship programs. So 2 examples here that are really, really good. One in Europe, it's called Deep Tech Founders. It's really for scientists to turn into entrepreneurs. Good training program over a year, and quite a lot of them are getting into entrepreneurship. Sometimes they find other people to lead the company, not themselves, because they don't feel like they should be a CEO. There's a good program in the US as well called Activate Fellowship. That's also been quite successful. And one aspect I like very much, so that's very new. So I spent the last week actually in Sherbrooke, in Quebec, working on that. That's an ecosystem, pretty small, but very active that we like very much. 2 hours east of Montreal, for those who don't know. Super strong in superconducting qubit. We're a professor there called Alexandre Blais, quantum matter as well, high-TC superconductors, been a huge experience there. So we've started actually a quantum venture studio, which is a fairly new initiative, the first in the world dedicated to quantum technologies, looking to people who are scientists, essentially, engineers who want to start a company, don't know what to do. So before incorporation, like what do they need to do for a year? How can we help them to get the company off the ground? And what's really important is to have a shared infrastructure. That's not necessarily in the university. Here, the example is the government of Quebec put 40 million Canadian dollars to renovate a building. That's turning into a shared workspace, not only offices like we work, but dilution fridges as a service, pay-per-use model, which is really cool because and these days, if you have a fridge like that, I mean, like it's full immediately, actually. Everybody wants that. So, but they did it, and it works. We have fridges, 3 fridges, and 2 more maybe are coming. 10 startups, European startups are going there also to work and manufacture and develop activities in North America. That's the case of Pascal in particular in our portfolio. We have an IBM computer in Bromont. It's not too far in our drive from there. So it's a model ecosystem for us. It's kind of our blueprint a little bit, but what works well, how the universities are involved with startups, with founders, how to get more projects started. So we like to use it kind of as a reference. And last, I want to talk about applications. So we've had the conversation a little bit earlier about that. But Oliver, he was talking about this. So usually when people are into applications in quantum, especially quantum computing, is to do so-called POCs, proof of concept. More or less small projects, so it depends in terms of price. It's 100K to 1 or 2 million, could be pretty large. There's a lot of activity. You see here, it's a slide from BCG. It shows the number of POCs of companies, or either startups, large corporates, working on use cases in the field of quantum computing. It has been going up drastically over the last year. I think it's good, but there are also some challenges when I'm looking at the details. Many times I would say the use case is not really interesting, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't have an impact for the company. They do it because it's easy, it was there, they thought of it, not a good response. More often than not, people don't know very well the subject matter, and that's particularly true, and if I'm honest, with our startups. I mean, they built by physicists. How should they know about everything in computational drug design, in finance, etc.? I mean, so building the internal expertise is key, not always there. And I think people need to know better the benchmarks, classical benchmarks, but are improving all the time. GPUs are fantastic. I mean, we need to beat these machines over the years. And I think there's definitely a challenge for us collectively to find new ways to look for impacting implications with a societal impact. But something that was in this nice perspective paper in Nature a couple of months ago, I think that's a quote I like, demonstrate the value of quantum computers for societal challenges. I mean, that's a challenge for the whole community and something we should look forward to all together. So a couple of ideas and just a few remarks to finish. I'm pretty sure I'm close to it, but one use case I like very much, it's in computational drug design, collaboration between two companies. I'm showing it here because I've seen over the years so many people telling me, you need a quantum computer to do chemistry. That's crazy. I mean, all the time, people tell me you need a quantum computer. That's not true. You can use perfectly good HPC GPU cluster to simulate very large molecules, 50,000 of 100,000 atoms. That works. You have approximate solutions, but pretty decent. This company, Qubit Pharmaceuticals, they're doing computational drug design, super strong at that. Now they're working with Pascal on one very small aspect on the workflow, not the whole computation of the molecules. It's just water placement. And that's important. And that's a good example of hybrid compute collaboration between people who know what they're talking about and the quantum physicists who are developing the processors on a tiny part of a process, but it will have an impact. And my last one, which is a little bit conceptual, but you'll find it somewhere in the paper that I'm prepared for, for the conference. I really think we should, I'm a VC, obviously, but I think VC is not good for everything. I think VC is good for some aspects of the funding of deployment of these technologies. There are many new ideas about what to do, new models for collaboration between labs, academics, corporates, large corporates, and startups, things like FROs, for example. I think I'm vouching very much for a concept which is I call co-design center for quantum applications. Not co-design in the sense that Misha talked about, which is software and hardware. So a bit beyond, really working together on applications and sharing infrastructure, tackling all the points that I mentioned earlier, and obviously focusing on societal challenges, energy, climate change, aging, etc. And two last examples, and I swear it's going to be over. Nice workshop, since for this conference here, we're also obviously interested in this kind of application. There was a nice workshop 2 months ago in Schenectady, upstate New York, at GE Research on quantum for climate and sustainability. Quite frankly, it was no greenwashing. I mean, good reflections, good discussions on what to do with these technologies, working on climate change. Mitigation and sustainability. So different kinds of experts, 2 days of discussions, quite deep workshop. I think it's going to be a publication. There's this initiative in Switzerland that's really recent. That's the Open Quantum Institute. Also there, the idea is to work on the project and sustainable development, a little bit like I mentioned earlier with these co-development centers. And that is my I don't think I'm open for discussion, but like if anybody wants to talk to me about how to do that, I dream of doing that. I mentioned that yesterday. I mean, for me, quantum is good for quantum, first thing, like quantum advantage for quantum materials. But what do we do with quantum materials? That's a big question. I think something we should think more seriously about. So I found this slide in a different form from Carlton Crawford from Las Alamos a few months ago. I was very excited, so I modified, but I would really be interested in figuring out how to do that. I mean, how to work together with condensed matter physicists, people developing quantum simulators, analog processors, quantum sensors, in that case, MD centers, to develop these materials and think seriously, not as an afterthought, but the applications of these technologies. Because obviously it will take 20 years, 50 years, I would say. I don't care. It will take time, but we should really work on this kind of thing. That's it. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.